Definitely been a lot of excitement today. This morning, Creative Assembly launched the the announcement trailer for Total War Warhammer 2. And in today's video, I really want to go over some of the units that are showcased in that video, kind of go over some of the lore involved with what they have discussed, and just kind of, I guess, paraphrase and re-go over some of the things that they touched in as well. So, the trailer opens up right away with a shot of Lustria. I know in one video I had speculated maybe that it might be the Southlands. Clearly, that is not the case. The camera kind of pans down, and we immediately jump into a shot of some Dark Elves from the top. And the first Dark Elf unit we see are Dark Elf crossbowmen with their repeater bolt throwers. You can kind of see from this picture a little bit of the what's that thing called? Their actual crossbows themselves, and they have this. It's not really a cartridge, but you can see it's called a repeater bolt thrower for a reason, because there's those bolts that are socketed into the top, and they just keep launching those things. And the tabletop, they've got like 2 attacks for these things. They're awesome. But as the video kind of progresses, you come to another top-down shot of the second Dark Elf unit we see, which is the Witches. And that's shortly after we get a little glimpse of the High Elf Spearmen. You can see them right here. I'll jump back to the Witches, but the High Elf Spearmen, a very beautiful and ornate unit. So the High Elves are pretty near and dear for me. I played the High Elves with my tabletop. That was the first army I ever started collecting outside of Bretonia, because that's what came out. Bretonia came in like the first starter pack for, oh man, I want to say it was like 5th edition or some shit. But I jumped into High Elves because they were really cool, and they're fast, and they're cool looking and everything. And you can see in this, they're just as fucking cool looking. Even the Dark Elves are rad. And that's the kind of cool thing with the Dark Elves versus the High Elves. They're almost like a carbon copy of each other with slight differences. Dark Elves have dark magic. High Elves have high magic, as you would assume. But you get these really beautiful looking units, all the golds, the blues, before jumping over to those Witches. So the Dark Elf Witches are pretty crazy. They're all light armor. They just use dual daggers, and they fuck shit up. In the tabletop, they're pretty crazy in the sense that they don't have that armor, obviously, so they're pretty weak. But once they get into close combat, they can really do a number on people. But we'll go into why there's High Elves and why there's Dark Elves, and how they all used to be at one point just called High Elves or Elves in general. I want to save that for a separate lore video, but I really wanted to get this video out here to talk a little bit about the two, because the next shot coming up is Techless. If you look at the Steam Workshop pre-order page, it says it's Tyrion. That is not true. Tyrion is Techless's twin brother. Techless is basically the world's best mage for the most part. There's a lot of people in the Warhammer world that hold that moniker. If you're not a Lizardman, you're not the world's best. The Lizardmen have the best mages, followed right by the High Elves, because these are the 2 races that have had magic the longest. Techless, in fact, actually opened up the College of Mages in Altdorf. Balthazar Gelt was one of his apprentices, and he taught the humans magic. And he figured, if I teach the humans magic, we have another ally against chaos. But we get this. I wasn't sure if it was Techless at first, because I'm so used to the way he looks in the book, which is they draw him very larger than life, with this giant crown of sapphire and everything, and he's got his staff of Lilith, or not Lilith. I can't think of the name, but someone will, I'm sure, correct me in the comments. But as soon as I saw the staff, I was like, ooh, that's Techless. So we've got Techless, who is going to probably he's definitely going to be one of the legendary lords for High Elves. His brother, Tyrion, a warrior counterpart on his horse, which is a badass as well. They're definitely going to be the legendary lords for High Elves. That's like 95% speculation right at that point, but until we see for sure, we can't know for sure until we see, but they're the 2 most likely candidates. And he's the best mage in the world, and Tyrion's one of the best fighters in the world. So on the tabletop, they play pretty awesomely. They're so expensive point wise, you can't take them really together in a 2,500 point army, but they're amazing. And I'm really excited to see how they do justice to Tyrion as well. But From there, we get a little bit more witches. You get to see that they're covered in blood because they worship Cain, the Dark Elves' primary god. The Dark Elves have a name. They're called the Druchi, and the High Elves have a name called the Asur. The Asur worship Asurian, their god. But as the video kind of progresses, we start to see it a little bit more because we see that big, just gold-faced monstrosity is Malekith. And Malekith is the son to Anarion. Anarion being pretty much like the first real Phoenix King. He's this guy who goes through all these ordeals and everything to get what's called the Sword of Cain from the Blighted Isles. And he becomes such a wrecking ball. He's able to kill off 4 greater demons of Khorne, or I'm sorry, not of Khorne, of Chaos, Khorne being one of them. In a trilogy of books that came out not too long ago, they touch on Teclis and Tyrion and Malekith and Anarion and a gentleman we're going to get to pretty soon from now, but how they all play together as, you know, the old guard and the new guard. You can kind of look at it as Tyrion and Teclis mirror Anarion and Calidor, who we'll see soon. And Malekith is kind of this grand antagonist in between. He's covered from head to toe in armor because he's covered from head to toe in burns. He walked through the Phoenix Gate, which was supposed to allow him to become a king, to ascend. And he was supposed to come through unscathed. That's kind of like the mark of it all. He did not. So he was burned from head to toe, and he has a beautiful gold mask resplendent with black armor. Delightful. But we kind of see Teclis coming up to this sort of device, this Lizardman thing, and little pebbles floating all over the place. Because, you know, that's just not fucking dirty. Lizardmen need to learn to clean up after themselves, damn it. But we get this glimpse into something. And there's clearly not a lot of context on what this is, but people, the big fluff boys in the Warhammer world like myself, know that this is the Great Ritual. They talk about the I think they call it the Great Cataclysm in some of the videos that Creative Assembly has launched, and it's basically a giant war with High Elves and Lizardmen versus Chaos, when Chaos really comes into the old and new world, as you'll find out that's what the name of this place is, but Malice, the Warhammer world, and just starts wrecking house. So the High Elves devise this great ritual. You've got Calidor, Dragon Tamer here. He's, like I was saying, the older, the Antiquities version of Teclis. He creates this great ritual, which basically creates a vortex, sucking up a good portion of the magical winds. So it greatly reduces the energy and the strength of the Chaos Army because they rely on those winds to stay in this realm, in this plane, as it were. And by Calidor doing this, he basically evens the odds and cuts off Chaos energy into the world, and it relegates it to the North and South poles where the Chaos Gates are. There's a whole big backstory between Anarion and Calidor and why this is a big point of contention for the two, and I don't want to really get into that too much because I want to focus more on the trailer. But he creates this giant vortex that in the end times Teclis wants to do away with, but I won't get into that. But that's who that is. So you've got that giant council, you've got them making that ritual, you've got Teclis kind of looking into some lore on this, and lo and behold, flunk, we've got some crossbow bolts into the face, and we get to see another glimpse of the Expo, or the Dark Elf crossbowmen. And we get maybe like the first real glimpse of High Elf magic in this game. You see Tyrion cast a spell. It could be high magic, it could not. But it's just kind of cool to see him cast a spell, and my nipples got hard nearly damn immediately. I was like, ooh, high magic, ooh. And you kind of get a little bit more of what the Dark Elves have before the Lizardmen jump into this thing. And, you know, what's the best way to introduce Lizardmen into this whole grand scheme, fuckery, whatever I want to call it, is a giant dinosaur. And that kind of jumps into the first legendary lord for a Lizardman being more than likely Krokgar, Kroq-Dar, who is this lizard on a dinosaur, as you would assume. And there's a lot of really cool Lizardmen heroes that are just monsters, quite literally, because they're lizards for one. But there's one who's strangled a demon prince with his bare hands. There's a great white lizard who is always like, he's like the Lizardman's version of the Hulk. He can never be killed, it seems like, because he's always, defeating the odds. Before we get to some skinks we see here in the very front after Krokgar. You see these little kind of guys with javelins just chucking them in the air and rootin' and tootin'. That's a little bit of skinkage. They're their range units. They launch javelins and they have ability to go chameleon and whatnot. I wonder how they're going to introduce that into the game. I could see them probably doing something where they are hidden off the bat, like some other units in the game as they are. And then you're coming behind them to the Saurus warriors. And these guys are their main core infantry. They've got Temple Guard, which are the elite versions of these guys. And they're really cool. And if you watch some of the other videos Creative Assembly released today, they show kind of how they wanted to do the animation for Lizardmen. And it's really awesome because they didn't want to take like, hey, here's anthropomorphic lizards that are actually just using human mocap. They wanted to make it look bestial and actually like lizards fighting. Well, I mean, as much as a sentient race of lizards with weapons can look like lizards fighting. But it's really cool to see how they took this approach and how they did it, because it makes for a really awesome character model, I think. And let's not forget probably the most iconic character model of today, Jabba the Hutt. Also known as Lord Mazdamundi, but still looks way too similar to it. It's really crazy just to see all this stuff animated, because, I mean, for years, I've only seen it as models and as books. So when you see it kind of all put together like this, it's pretty, I don't want to say intimidating, but it's just amazing to see, because you have this image of how these things look in your mind from reading all this lore, from seeing all these models, from playing these games with people for hours, and then to see it all put to life like this is, let me tell you, pretty fucking rad. But then right after we see Mazdamundi, we see, a big charge of dark elves, and we see, this is like one of those, like, if you pause this here, focus here, like when I was watching like NCIS, zoom in there, yep, Seaman, knew it, open and shut case Johnson. But if you pause it during that whole like dark elf rush past Malekith, you've got you see a guy with a sword, so that probably means that the dark swords will be in here, which are the dark elves sword units. They also have a spear counterpart. I haven't really gone into the other legendary lord. I think it would be for the dark elves, but so if we're listing them out here, we've got Tyrion and Teclis for the high elves, Malekith and his mom Marathai, the Hag Queen, basically just a scantily clad, giant boobed dark elf queen riding a dark Pegasus, which is a pretty awesome thought in and of itself. But if you're looking at Tyrion and Teclis, you've got their counter opposite in Malekith and Marathai, because they're both, one's a warrior, one's a mage, one's a really good mage, and one's a really good warrior. Malekith, though, does have wizarding. He is a wizard. I think he's a level 1 or 2 wizard in the book, and he rides a big black dragon. So I'm definitely excited to see how they use that progression, like they have for Manfred or Karl Franz or Leon Leonker, who can eventually ride their iconic mounts. And Lizardmen, of course, we're saying Krokgar would be the warrior legendary lord, and Lord Mazdamundi would be the the wizard legendary lord. Of course, Lord Mazdamundi being probably the most spellcaster in the Warhammer world, outside of maybe Nagash or Lord Croak, who if they added that would be pretty awesome too. But he's a giant mummified version of Jabba the Hutt here that is incredibly powerful. But there's one last little kind of, hey, if you freeze, you can see this, but you could get a slight glimpse at the phoenixes that the high elves have. They've got 2 different types of phoenixes. One's frost, one's flame. So you by pausing it, right, those 3 creatures fly by at around like 2 minutes or so, or like 2 minutes 10 seconds, I think it is, into the video. You get to see what is definitely phoenixes. They've got the large plinths on their back, like the chairs that the high elf princes sit on, or nobles, depending on what it is. So you see these phoenixes being added into the game too. Hopefully the frost variants, because they both have different dynamics. Like the fire variant can fly over units and burn them, whereas the frost variant is just insanely powerful. Like it's got an aura that slows everything around it and everything like that. So they both have very different ways of playing, but very, very awesome in their own right. So I'm definitely excited to see how this turns out. We don't get an actual release date. We do get 2017 and a little shot of the Great Vortex in the distance, which is going to be over Ulthuan. The Great Vortex is in Ulthuan over the Isle of the Dead. So I'm very curious to see how they have that dynamic as well, because they were saying that the Great Vortex will be all the races are vying for the Great Vortex. So I'm curious to see if, okay, is that the grand campaign capture point, or how does it all work? But at the very end of the trailer, we do get a kind of a teaser shot of a simple little rat, little guy, little glowing rat, and he's got some pustules on him and everything. And as we all know, Clan Pestilence is in Lustria. That's where they got their start before they moved back to Skaven Blight to start the first Skaven Civil War. So I'm definitely curious to see how they're going to launch that, if they're going to be like the Warriors of Chaos as a pre-order bonus, if they're going to be an unannounced race right off the bat. During the press release, they did say there was going to be 4 races, so they didn't say what the 4th one is, but clearly there's everything hinting towards this. But I'm definitely excited for this. They did say that the co-op campaign is going to have the ability to play the same race, so that's really cool. So that means if you watch a lot of my streams, or I'm sorry, a lot of my videos, you know that Turn and I play together, so maybe Turn and I can play as Lizardmen or the High Elves, or the Dark Elves, what have you. And they said that shortly after the patch, they will be releasing I guess it would be a free LC, but basically a patch that will allow you to play the grand campaign with Warhammer Total Warhammer 1 Total War Warhammer 1 socketed into this with its game world. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out and what that means for the 3rd iteration or any other kind of future DLC for Warhammer 2. So very excited, guys. Please don't forget to subscribe, and if you have any other questions or comments about lore, please feel free to comment. I love having conversation with you guys about it. It's pretty fun. But be on the lookout for some more lore videos coming on this. I definitely want to release one for High Elf, for Dark Elves, and Lizardmen. And who knows, maybe some of the Skaven clans. But thanks, guys. Have a good weekend, and enjoy all the hype.